I know this card happened back on New Year's Eve, but the fact that it happened on New Year's Eve, what a card! Like
And to have best versus best.
best versus best, that was. I mean, if I'm honest, I was maybe I don't know yet. I guess I haven't fully like digested. Am I surprised that Bellator swept Ryzen, or am I not surprised? I want to say I'm not surprised, just because MMA in the U.S. is far more ahead of its time than most locations in the world. If we're being honest, right? But at the same time, you want to. I would have wanted to think that Ryzen would have gotten a couple wins, but it was only 5 fights.
And I'll preface all of this by saying hats off to both Bellator and RIZIN, because their other promotions would never consider doing this, and this is almost unheard of. So I do want to start out by saying thank you to both promotions, because this was incredible to have an event go on like this, and it is I would say historic. I do want to point out that was Horiguchi with Ryzen before?
Yeah, so this was definitely. I want to say this wasn't the first time they've done something like this. Maybe to this magnitude where it's best versus
To
best.
this magnitude of like champions and best versus
Right.
each other.
But
Absolutely.
Horiguchi was definitely Team Ryzen a year or two ago, and to see him on the opposite side, that was definitely a little weird.
I think that, I expected Pitbull to do Pitbull kind of things. I think that lightweight fight with AJ McKee, and I can't remember the guy that he was fighting. It's blocked here on the screen with the live logo. That fight was absolutely incredible, back and forth, and those guys were trading shots and put on quite a show, and definitely made it a main event. But
Oh, it was
I
fun. It was so fun. I mean, it just goes to show you, right? Like the different styles of mixed martial arts around the world. But not only that, like is the is isn't Ryzen the most WWE or pro wrestling like promotion we've seen? Those entrances were wild to see.
and also this is Ryzen. This isn't one championship.
Right.
Like I think that a lot of people would almost consider Ryzen a regional promotion. I mean,
Which
this
is crazy, right? Because it's definitely not in the greater scheme of things, but to the casual or the to the US fan, yeah, it's definitely not UFC.
it's definitely one of the less heard of promotions, and and they put on quite, and whether or not, right, it was a 5-0 sweep for Bellator. Congratulations to them. I don't know of many fights that were just walkthroughs. I mean, obviously Pitbull did what Pitbull did. Archuleta had a back and forth fight.
They were fun.
Horiguchi, I mean, he kind of represents for Ryzen himself. At lightweight, they were trading back and forth too. I I think that this was a really, really close contested card, even though it was 5-0 sweep for Bellator.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact results, but there were definitely some decisions. I think there were some split decisions. There might have been a unanimous decision in there, but it was definitely competitive. It was fun. And let's be real, right? Like, even if other parts of the world aren't as up to par as the United States when it comes to mixed martial arts, things like this actually move the needle and actually allow them to get better, right? It gives them that experience of fighting maybe not outside of their country, but opponents outside of their country. Like that is huge to the everyday regional fighter, right? Like if you're looking at Ryzen as a regional promotion, you have to think they got whether they lost, they got exponentially better being part of this card, having this many eyes on themselves, fighting top tier talent. That's huge, and it goes a long way. And we might not see the effects of that tomorrow or a month from now, but give it a year or two, that type of experience is so beneficial
And
for
I pulled up the results here too, just to look at it.
Mhm.
And every fight went to a decision. Juan Archuleta and Kim went to a split decision. So that was the one that you were thinking of.
Mhm.
But none of the fights were finishes. All of them were competitive. Every fight went to a decision. So that even goes even closer than what I was remembering. That every fight was down to the last minute and had to have the scorecard. So it wasn't like anybody got steamrolled, right?
Right. Well, and honestly, we probably didn't remember because it was New Year's Eve. I mean, we were so we probably don't remember fully the aspects, but what I do remember vividly was, I mean, obviously the close decision fights, but the entrances. The entrances just made me think like New Japan Pro Wrestling, WWE esque, AEW esque. Like it was fun. It was so much fun, and whether I was 100% tuning in or not, the fact that it was happening on New Year's Eve, where there's not much competition that night, I think
There was
that
a lot of show. There was a lot of show to it, a lot of spectacle.
it was
Right.
cool. It was cool. It just reminded me of like a WrestleMania, a big pay per view, right? Where the entrances matter. You don't really see that in the UFC nowadays, other than really Izzy, right? Like Izzy's really the
Right.
only one, other than McGregor. I mean, we've seen multiple McGregor fights live, and his entrances are always extravagant, but Izzy has that extra that extra flavor. He's
Whatever it is, he's got that something.
right. So kind of to see all these Bellator fighters like dressed up in samurai suits, like that was pretty sick. So yeah, hopefully this is a tradition that happens every New Year's Eve. I want to say it's happened 2 times now. I don't think they were consecutively,
I
but
remember it happening at least once before. I wouldn't be surprised if it's happened a couple times before, but I, I do hope that the trend continues and that maybe some other promotions pick it up too. And you can have, imagine like a Mortal Kombat tournament, right, between different promotions. But
right.
I hope that they do continue to branch out and have more cross promotional competitions like this.
That would be honestly ideal and so good for MMA as a whole, right? Like I said earlier, when you have this type of competition, when you're abroad and you're not used to being exposed to these types of fighters and this much high level talent, it goes a long way. But that kind of goes to my next question, right? Like Bellator and Rising continue to do this. They set aside their prides, their egos. They say, "Hey, let's put best versus best. Let's see who comes up on top." What are some dream MMA promotions that we would want to see this happen to? I mean, we're starting to see that in pro wrestling too, right? With AEW and New Japan recently. I think NXT is doing it with their internal brands, NXT US and NXT UK. But in the MMA world, like obviously we'd want to see the UFC take part in something like this, but who would we want to see them against?
I mean, obviously the first name that comes to mind is Bellator, right? I think if you were able to get something like Battle of ESPN where you had them against the PFL, that would be kind of cool. Maybe you could have kind of like, I don't know, like an Ultimate Fighter kind of setup where you have them battle some of their regional scenes, like an LFA or a CFFC, something on Fight Pass, right?
That would
Where
be fun, actually. Like dissect that a little more, right? Like imagine, we liked watching the Ultimate Fighters, and they've changed drastically over the years. But imagine bringing in all the Bellator fighters, the RIZIN fighters, like the champions anyway, right? Like and putting them in a tough season. What do you think about?
Well, what I was even saying before is you have a UFC versus LFA, or you have a UFC versus CFFC, just to keep with the consistency, right? And you have somebody from the regional promotion fight somebody on the UFC, and they would never do this, right? Because they don't want their guys to lose. But imagine you have the guy for the LFA fighting, and if he wins, he gets a contract with the UFC. You don't necessarily have to kick the guy out of the UFC for losing. That would add an extra little flair, and I'm sure they would love the drama to it, right? But imagine something like that where it's like, all right, you're in this fight now. If you beat the guy from the UFC, you get a contract and you're in. Come on, kid, let's go.
That would be sick. And honestly, like I forgot which Ultimate Fighter it was specifically, but when they had all the flyweight champions of the world under the same house, and the winner got to fight Demetrius Johnson from the
Right.
game, that was sick. Like, let's bring something like that back.
Right.
That
Right.
would be cool.
And I think the Ultimate Fighter, as great as it is, you need to do something more to flare it up. It needs to be more than just guys in the house and then fighting in the competition. There needs to be some sort of twist or surprise at the end for it. It doesn't have to be a championship fight guarantee, right? Because who's going to do that? You fight through the Ultimate Fighter, or maybe you do that with the top 15. Imagine that, right? Pick a division. You have the top 10 or top 8 in the division fight each other in a bracket on the way up, similar to what they're doing in the Bellator World. The $1 million Grand Prix that they're having. Do a similar show kind of like that with now we're here pitching $1 million ideas. We got a copyright.
That would be sick. And listen, I would love to see UFC up against all of these people, or putting the Ultimate Fighter show with multiple brands, or at the very least, their UFC Fight Pass brands, since they already work closely with them. But man, I would love to see one championship versus RIZIN, or
right,
PFL versus Bellator. If I'm not mistaken, PFL wanted all the smoke on Twitter recently.
Give it to them.
No, they wanted all. I want to say a fan tweeted at them saying something like, "Oh, let's see PFL versus Bellator," and PFL responded, "They don't want the smoke." So, yo, give me one championship versus RIZIN. Give me Bellator versus the PFL. Give me UFC versus any one of those brands. I think that would be cool. Even bringing it to the regional scene, an LFA versus CFFC card would be absolutely insane. Let's talk about it, right? They already have that invitational where they have like 4 brands compete in a jiu-jitsu tournament.
Right, they have the grappling contest. Yeah.
Right, UFC Fight Pass Invitational. Let's take it one step further. Let's do a freaking...
I mean, the framework's already been established, right? You guys can work together as promotions. It would be off the chain.
UFC Fight Pass, if you're listening to this, if somebody from UFC Fight Pass is listening to this, because I know some people read articles on the Scrap, please make sure you bring this up.
Make it happen. What do we got to do to make it happen?
Make it happen, right? And let's raise the stakes. If we did a LFA versus CFFC card, and there's a million promotions on that platform that can go head to head, but these are the 2 prominent. I mean, you could throw in Cage Warriors too if you want, since they've been making a splash in California.
Absolutely keep Cage Warriors in there.
Absolutely, yeah, it's one of the funnest promotions for sure. Let's put their champions up against each other in their divisions. The winner either secures a UFC contract or gets a
contender series or gets into the Ultimate Fighter house. Something, right?
Exactly. Something. Let's raise the stakes. Let's make the fact that these promotions and the fighters fighting under these promotions, like, let's make that fact that they're fighting under these bright lights, let's make it worth it.
I mean, they're already feeder promotions anyway. They talk about it all the time, and it's true. You have many fighters coming from these promotions, and it's great. This is how it should be. I like the way that they have that set up. You have them on your promotion, your platform, where you can show them and gain some notoriety and some fan, and all of a sudden they're getting signed up because they became a champion in your organization. Why not put an actual pen to paper or something along the lines to make that happen? Because it already kind of does. Why not make it interesting and draw some attention to it?
I agree. Let's do it. That would be so fun. I mean, aside from LFC, the Cage Warriors, the CFFCs of the world, we love watching Lux Fight League.
Yeah, they always bring it every single time. I don't ever see hands getting tossed. They're always smacking each other around. It's great.
Always. We need more of it. Let's open, if we really want to benefit the sport in the long run. I mean, sure, the fact that they're on UFC Fight Pass alone is huge, but let's take it a step further. Let's put stipulations to some of these fights. Let's make an actual case rather than this political bullshit where if you're signed to one specific agency or one of the top agencies that you'll get in immediately. Like, let's rid the bullshit let's make this an even playing field. Let's put together something cool with the Fight Pass promotions, and let's get them an actual way to the UFC where you can actually check off some boxes rather than it being a political shit show. That would
Say
be
it louder. Say it louder for the people in the back. Make sure everybody can hear you. Say it louder.